Looking ahead today on Peacock and Williamson to the 2023 season, which teams in the NFL have the best chance to go from last place to first place in their respective divisions? All divisions, AFC, NFC. Who's going worst to first in 2023 right now?
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock and Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to the Everydayers. What do we have coming up this week? Well, we're going worst to first, and tomorrow taking a peek at the other side, which teams could be dropping from first place to last place in their respective divisions in the NFL. Make sure you get your Twitter questions in early for this week's mailbag at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL on Twitter, or drop a comment on the new Peacock and Williamson YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed up there and everywhere you get your podcasts. So let's just start with every last place team, Matt, and talk through these and see which ones have the best shot. And then at the end, we'll rank which ones we think actually do have that legitimate shot and will become a worst to first team, because it happens every year, Matt. And the NFL is chaotic and so much happens in the league. And when teams start to get good, they get good fast. That's one thing that I've noticed around the league. And it happened last year with the team that drafted first overall in the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? And they're a playoff team all of a sudden. So let's start with the AFC East and those New York Jets, which were 7-10, pretty respectable team despite their chaos at quarterback in 2022, Matt. The 7-10 Jets were in last place in the AFC East. What do you think about their shot to maybe win it all this year?
Yeah, I think they're a strong candidate for when we scan these 8 divisions, which we're about to do. The Jets probably have maybe as good a shot as any, but I think we both would concede this is probably the toughest division in the league. But man, their defense was really solid last year. I think it'll remain at a top 10 type of unit on that side of the ball. They lost their last 6 in a row. I mean, the wheels really came off. The quarterback position was a disaster. I think Rodgers, even if he's not 2 years ago MVP Rodgers, gives them a chance to win 10 games. And in this division, maybe you win 4 out of your 6 division games and you end up on top. I don't think that's crazy talk for the Jets.
If you're looking for a team, what's the formula to be in a whole lot better? Well, it's probably personnel-wise, starting with quarterback, that you got a whole lot better. So check that box for the Jets. Are they good coaching wise? Are they good on defense? I think you check those boxes.
I think so,
as well. You look at the offensive lines and the defensive lines. And so the New York Jets have just as good of a chance, I think, as any team in the NFL to be a very improved football team in 2023 if, injuries and all of those things, of course, go their way. And look, they only have to win 3 more games than they did last year to get into the playoff. They have to win quite a few more games to reach the 13-win total of the Buffalo Bills, though, and that's what makes this difficult, because it is a tough division, and there's very good teams that were above them. The New England Patriots are always going to be tough and difficult, even though I don't think either of us, are hugely excited about the prospects for the Patriots, but they could be for sure better. Just having a better offensive coordinator could get them from 8-9 and flip that to at least 9-8, right, for the Patriots. No, we'd be shocked there if they were over 500. Miami Dolphins were a 9-8 team last year, and I think we're probably better than that record, and depends on their quarterback health, right? And of course, the Buffalo Bills, who I just mentioned, won the division with 13 wins. So it's still as good as the Jets could be. There's a lot of work to do, because is one of the better divisions in football right now.
Yeah, to me, that's the biggest obstacle. Like, if the Jets were in either the South, we'd be like, boy, I might pick them to win the division. I mean, in this one, it's like they can. I mean, they'd have to have a very good year, but it's certainly possible. And I think that's a big compliment considering the status of this division.
All right, so the Jets have a good shot for it. We'll see how they rank in with the rest of these teams as we look ahead to 2023 and which teams could go worst to first in their respective divisions. AFC North, Matt. The Cleveland Browns were, like the Jets, 7-10 last year. So that's a pretty good record for the last place team in a division. And again, it's a very competitive division where I think, and you probably could say this almost any year about every team, that they got better, right? And we'll see which teams actually did get better. We might look at the other side of that coin on tomorrow's show, looking at first to worst teams. But the Cincinnati Bengals won the North last year at 12-4. Then you had the Baltimore Ravens at 10-7. The Pittsburgh Steelers at 9-8, and the Cleveland Browns were last place at 7-10. How do you feel about the Cleveland Browns going into 2023 and potentially winning the North?
Well, I think they've had a very good offseason. I think their passing game is expanded. A big weakness a year ago, the defensive line outside of Myles Garrett now looks like a strength. I'm sure they'll run the ball well. But, the Jets, I just said, I'm certain the Jets will get better quarterback play. I'm not as certain with the Browns. They could. I hope all these conversations aren't just, well, if the quarterback plays well, they're going to win. Because, that could be said, when we talk about C.J. Stroud and whoever. But, boy, Watson has to be what they're paying for. And he absolutely could be, but I think he's one of the biggest wild cards in the whole league right now. Their roster is certainly good enough to win a very good division. I think there's some volatility in Baltimore. Baltimore, I think, could win 13 games or they could win 7. I think Cincy is going to be a solid team. I think the Steelers are getting better gradually and aren't going to fall off a cliff. So, again, tough climb. But if Watson is the old Watson, they certainly have a chance. Very good chance.
I don't even know what level Watson has to get compared to past Watsons, because when you look at his stats last year, they were just not good. And he was coming off just not playing. He hadn't played since 2020. So he missed 2021 and then missed parts of 2022. So he only played 6 games last year after all that time off and everything, the turmoil off the field for him. If you go back to the last time he played, Matt, in Houston in 2020, he played 16 games and he completed 70.2% of his passes for nearly 5,000 yards, 4,823 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. That's a guy that you're looking at as a potential MVP candidate going into the following season. And then we know what happened going into the following seasons, plural, after that 2020 year with the Houston Texans and asking to be traded and then all the off-field stuff. And last year for those 6 games, Matt, he only completed 58.2% of his passes. He had 7 touchdowns and I believe it is 8 interceptions here. No, 5 interceptions. Sorry, the fonts are too small for me. My computer's far away. 7 touchdowns and 7 touchdowns to 5 interceptions last year. And so he doesn't even have to get all the way back to 2020 version. He just got to split the difference, which I don't see how he couldn't be at least better than what we saw from him last year in limited action after everything we talked about going on. So I think it's the easiest. I think it's easier to check this box with Watson and the quarterback position for the Browns being better almost than it is for a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers with the Jets.
The reason I disagreed with you is I thought Brissett played well. So I think Watson almost has to be better than what he was.
Yes.
Will the whole quarterback situation be 2 steps ahead of where it was for the whole season? I think so. I have faith that he's a really good player, and say what you want about him off the field. You can excuse what he did on the field because of the insane path he took. 700 days off is bonkers. But you still got to beat the Steelers, Ravens, Bengals. That's not the Jaguars, Titans, Colts.
And looking at those Jacoby Brissett numbers, so if you put them together, with Watson, Brissett's side of the numbers were 64%, 2,800 yards, and 12 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Or 6 interceptions. Okay. So led the, didn't light the league on fire, but certainly was better than the 6-game sample of Deshaun Watson, which they were hoping would be better quarterback play than Brissett's. And it wasn't numbers wise. And so is the totality of Deshaun Watson in 2023 better than everything we saw from Brissett and Watson combined last year? And I still think that's a big yes, but it still has to happen for the Browns.
Yeah. It's certainly feasible.
And they got better elsewhere, right?
Oh, I think so.
Quarterback, this is a pretty good football team. Elijah Moore added to the mix with Amari Cooper, Cedric Tillman, the 3rd rounder. On the offensive line, they've still got Jedrick Wills at left tackle, Batonio, Ethan Posich, Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin, Njoku at tight end, right? Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, by the way, is going to be on all my fantasy teams at running back. So Yeah, it's a great group. And then you've got Myles Garrett, and you've got Dalvin Tomlinson, who they added as a free agent. Zadarius Smith they brought in to go with, I thought, a really good draft that they had in the third and fourth rounds, drafting guys like Tillman, and they drafted Isaiah McGuire on the defensive line, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah with all that beef up in front to keep him clean and flying around the football field, Denzel Ward and Delpit and Thornhill and Newsome in the secondary. With Cam Mitchell, who they brought in at corner, and Ronnie Hickman. And so, I don't know. I think this is a good football team that has a very good chance to be better. And the question probably for me with the Browns is how much better and what's going on in the North, because it's a pretty tough division.
100% agree. I mean, again, like the Jets, if they were in the AFC South, I would say, boy, I like their chances. But there's three tough teams to jump.
Speaking of the AFC South, next, Matt, AFC South and West, we'll talk about the NFC, and we'll throw our money down, Matt, on the teams that we think will actually go worst to first in their divisions in 2023. Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet, now up to $2,500. That's right, a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And there's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sports book, FanDuel. Not only NBA playoffs, we've got NHL playoffs that have had some unbelievable overtime matchups. Of course, there's Major League Baseball all summer. You can still bet on a ton of NFL futures for that 2023 season. If you think your team will go worst to first, well, now's the time to bet before they start winning football games in 2023. Get those better odds at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, Matt, we're getting into the NFC South now. Worst to first teams in 2023. And it gets a lot more difficult because the Houston Texans have some work to do. At 3-13 last year, 3-13-1 last year, that means they have to improve 4 games just to get to where the Jets and the Browns were that we just talked about.
Yeah. I don't see it. I don't see a worst to first. I see improvement, but rookie quarterbacks struggle. Rookie head coaches struggle. I think the defense in Houston is really lacking talent still. There's 2 or 3 pieces, but the offense is starting to shape up. I know this kind of circumvents the exercise, but the Colts were 1 game better than the Texans. I could write a story where the Colts win this division. I can't with the Texans.
Man, it's really hard for both, because when you look at the Jets and the Browns, it's like, oh, okay, there's a really, really good reason why their quarterback play could be not only improved at the top of the league potentially. It's going to be hard to say that about the Colts or the Texans with a rookie quarterback. And with the Jaguars last year, who did go to worst to first, this is a division where it only took 9 games to win that division, 9 wins, right? So that the division part of it is a little bit easier, especially easier last year. But what do the Jaguars have? They didn't have a rookie quarterback. They had the guy getting his second year bump at quarterback, which was huge for them. And so it's a lot more difficult to see for teams like the Texans and the Colts. Could I write the story of, you talked about the Colts maybe even winning the division. What about the Texans going worst to second? That's pretty good. And that's a little bit easier, right?
Yeah, that I could see. I think Tennessee's going to be really bad. I don't think it's crazy to say maybe Jacksonville stumbles a little bit, but I can't see Houston being a winning team, over 500.
It's going to be huge, too, because that will complete the trade that the Texans utilize their own future first, because they have Cleveland's future first next year as well in 2024 draft. But they traded away their own to go up with the Cardinals to number 3 to get Will Anderson. So is this team, like most teams with rookie quarterbacks, pretty bad and picking really high again? That'll skew that trade in a certain direction. But I do think they're a better team across the board. It's just, and maybe even at quarterback, but it's still a rookie quarterback. So, how many more wins do you get than 3? If you win 7-8 games, it's a huge win for the Texans in their development.
Exactly. I mean, that's what you should shoot for, not, hey, we're going to own the division already.
That defense, though, does the defense take this massive leap with DeMeco Ryans? And that'll get you your 4 wins to 7 right there, probably.
I just think the defense is short on talent. The next offseason will be about the defense.
How about the AFC West? We've got the Kansas City Chiefs who won it at 14-3 last year. The Chargers 10-7. The Raiders were not last place; they were 6-11. So now you've got the Denver Broncos that were a 5-12 team that brought in a new head coach, Sean Payton. So if it's not coach, quarterback, I mean, those are the two most important factors in a team getting a lot better from one year to the next. And they have a veteran quarterback that played some of his worst ball. Can new head coach Sean Payton turn that around for Russell Wilson and the Broncos? That's almost the entire story here.
See, I'm warming up to that he can. I mean, I think they have some O-line running game in place. They have a lot of weapons. I think the defense is good, and I do think Wilson and Payton have had such success in this league that these two proud guys will make it look a lot better than it was a year ago. But Mahomes and Reed just own the division. I mean, they were 6-0 in the division. They seems like they are every year. I can see Denver going worst to second. I mean, it almost is like if Mahomes gets hurt, they're in it. But I don't know that we can play that game,
Right. Worst to second, worst to third. Sure. But even the Chargers, I think, are going to be a better football team.
I do too. I mean, I think the Raiders are going to be clearly worst in the West, which is progress, I guess, for Denver. I can see Denver winning 8 games.
And we're talking worst to first, but, the first step is to climb out of the cellar.
Right.
And there's a path for all these teams to do that. And obviously the Denver Broncos, we'll see it looks like with Sean Payton there. But you've got, I mean, there's so many weapons. They really underachieved as bad as you could last year. And so that's where, to me, you point to the coaching staff. And they still have a pretty good offensive line. They still have a ton of talent at wide receiver with Judy and Sutton, Tim Patrick, and then you get Marvin Mims in the second round coming in to be a sort of a deep threat for that team. Add a little juice to the offense. Javonte Williams coming back from injury. So we'll see what it looks like there. And on the defensive side of the ball, I think some work to do. They lost Bradley Chubb in the trade last year, right? So the defensive line is probably the one thing that holds them back from being a team that really flips the switch into being a scary football team and just being like, okay, they're better, but they still need more on defense, even though they can cover a little bit.
That's what I think as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That means we are on to the NFC side of things, Matt. In the NFC East, the last place teams in the East was a 500 football team, the 8-1 Washington Commanders that were just behind the Giants. The Dallas Cowboys were a 12-win team, and obviously we know the run that the Philadelphia Eagles went on last year to the Super Bowl at 14-3. 8-8 Washington Commanders. Where do they get better to potentially go win this division?
Yeah, you would think a team that's at 500 in fourth place would be your top candidate to go worst to first. But unfortunately for Washington, no fault of their own, I think the two best teams in the NFC are in their division. So, I mean, I think that's a tough jump. I mean, Washington versus the Giants for third place to me is going to be a conversation. I can't see worst to first from Washington. I mean, I think they could run the ball well. Yes, they have weapons. That D-line could be utterly dominant. But that's probably a 10-win ceiling.
Of all the teams we talked about, Matt, I think they have the least chance, even though they've had the best record of all the teams we talked about.
Maybe. Yeah. I tend to agree with you. I mean, just the teams ahead of them are too good.
Right. And where's the thing you point to where it's like, oh, this is so much different for Washington this year versus last year. They're going to win 5 more games because of blank. And it's hard.
Sam Howell's the best player in the league. Like, right. I'm squinting pretty hard for that.
We talked about how the Browns needed to improve from Jacoby Brissett. So if it's not Sam Howell, it's Jacoby Brissett. That's the other quarterback that would take over for Sam Howell. So this one's really hard for me. And I would say when we rank these, they might be the least likely team to go worst to first.
But they could be the 7th wild card team in a bad conference. They may end up with 10 wins or something, but be third in the division, or just
don't get a bunch worse.
Right.
And you might be okay still if you're Washington, right? But winning 5 more games is hard for me to see.
I agree.
NFC North, they had the worst team in the league last year, Matt. I just talked about how the Jaguars did it, and this is the same. This is the same sort of formula, right? You get better everywhere. Your quarterback takes that next step. We saw it mid-season for Justin Fields last year. They were 3-14. Now they had the worst point differential in the entire NFL last year, minus 137 points. So that's a lot of points to make up. But they also lost a whole bunch of really close games. So some of the games they lost, those could be flipped, I think, if they just replayed last year. So I'm pretty bullish on the Bears. Maybe I shouldn't be, but I just think they got better in a lot of places. Offensive line better, receivers a lot better, which was the worst position group on the team. And then just that incremental step from their young, super talented quarterback Give me some Bears, and guess what? Aaron Rodgers no longer in the division, man.
Yeah, that's big. I don't have a lot of respect. It kind of reminds me of Houston, actually. I don't have a lot of respect for the other teams in the division. There's no Chiefs, Eagles, Dallas, etc., like we've talked about. But also, like Houston, I think they're a year away from this conversation. And you referenced some of the additions. I think the offense, like Houston, is going to go from like worst in the league to middle of the pack. I just think the defense has nothing. I mean, I think next offseason is going to be defense. And sure, they'll run the ball well, and they'll try to keep that defense off the field, and they'll probably win more than 0 games in the division like last year. But I mean, again, I don't have a lot of respect for the Vikings and Packers and semi for the Lions. I just don't know that I can write a story where this team wins 9 or 10.
They're going to have to outscore some people. That's for
Yeah,
sure. Can they do it is the big question there, because they've got a running game. They already had that. Of course, Justin Fields is a big part of that at quarterback. So Fields takes the step. You have Deontay Foreman and Rashawn Johnson added to the running back mix with Khalil Herbert, but more importantly, the offensive line, your first round pick and Darnell Wright at right tackle, solidified that opposite tackle from Braxton Jones, who was a really nice pick last year. Huge vote of confidence, by the way, for the 5th rounder from last year, Braxton Jones, to be the longtime left tackle for them going into year 2. So improvements in year 2 for Jones. Then you have Tevin Jenkins sliding into left guard, no more bouncing around right tackle. And, so left guard to stay, Whitehair at center, Nate Davis, who they brought in from Tennessee at right guard, much improved offensive line. Of course, DJ Moore, Claypool, full season and off season, Darnell Mooney. That's a really solid 1-2-3 there for the Bears, and so much more improved than what we've seen for the weapons. And of course, Cole Kmet at tight end. So love what can happen there offensively if everything comes together and they take their step. But defensively, it's the defensive line that I think could hold them back. And, DeMarcus Walker's a free agent from Tennessee who they brought in, Andrew Billings they brought in. They have Justin Jones on the defensive line, Travis Gibson. I don't think any 4 of those would start for most of the good offensive lines around the NFL, and maybe some mediocre offensive lines. But they've got Gervin Dexter and Zach Pickens at tackle that they drafted in round 2 and 3. Dominique Robinson, who showed some flashes as a 5th rounder last year. I like what's going on in the secondary, but that front 7 is where I really get worried about this team.
Yeah, I mean, I like their linebackers, but the D line I think is maybe the worst in the league when it's all said and done.
Did make a big splash signing of Tremaine Edmonds, so that'll help the linebacking group, obviously, TJ Edwards. But defensive line, that's what will hold back the Bears most likely, or if Justin Fields doesn't take that next step.
Which I don't think is a guarantee. I mean, I like Fields, but I'm not.
It's still a projection.
Right.
NFC South.
What do you do? I'm going to say yes. Somebody's going to win. Yeah.
Let's take a break here. NFC South, NFC West, and then we'll throw down, Matt, our picks for the teams that will actually go worst to first in 2023. But first, I want to thank everybody for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to the everydayers. Get those mailbag questions in. Drop a comment on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed up. Hit the bell. Hit the like. And find us on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts every stinking day, including this holiday Monday, Matt. So happy Memorial Day for you. I hope you had a good weekend. I had a nice little barbecue this weekend, and
nice.
Had a lot of fun.
So the South is kind of ruins the exercise a little bit.
I mean, come on. The Falcons were 7-10, and the Saints were 7-10, right?
So were Carolina.
And that's true. So technically, the Falcons were 4th. Because
I think they picked the earliest when it was all said and done. But
right. So if we're going strict, we got to be talking about the Falcons going worst to first. But in reality, these were 3 7-10 teams. So which one do you like to actually go worst to first of these teams? Because I don't think it would be the Falcons to me. It'd probably be the Saints, just because I think they're a more talented roster. But I could buy the argument for the Falcons too, because again, year 2 quarterback taking a leap.
I mean, honestly, I think Tampa will not win the division, so there will be a worst to first.
Yeah, if you're counting all 3, then it's almost a guarantee in this division that it's a worst to first if it's one of those 3 teams just finishing ahead of the Bucs.
Yeah, and so I kind of want to skip this division in a way because they just screw up the drill. But if as it stands today, I think I would pick the Saints to win the division. I think they're the most stable, especially at quarterback and on defense. But I think Atlanta got noticeably better. Ritter just worries me a little bit, but I think there's so much around him and the defense might not stink then I could write the story where Atlanta wins the division too.
By the way, the 8-9 Bucks, who won the division last year, a game ahead of all three of those 7 and 10 teams, they had the worst point differential in the division at -45, and the Saints had the best at -18. So the entire division was minus point differential on the year. But I think we have to consider the Falcons here. Let's focus on the Falcons.
Okay.
Worst to first for the Falcons. What do you say there?
Very possible. Again, I don't think the competition is very difficult. I thought the defense was horrendous, and I think it can go from horrendous to average. You know, they may have overspent on some dudes, but I don't care about that for this exercise. Really good O-line, really good running game. Ritter doesn't have to do a ton to get this team to 9 wins to win a bad division. I mean, throw in the Pitts and London and Bijan and those guys. So, yeah, I think that's quite possible.
Here's the things. I don't think they got better in the run game because they're already pretty good in the run game.
Yeah.
So to me, it's Ritter and the defense, and whatever Ritter does will be huge. Is the defense good enough to win some of those games? And for an offense, it's probably not going to be lighting the scoreboard on fire. Can the defense keep those games close for, a year or two leap for Desmond Ritter there? It's tough. And for the Panthers too, considering them, I mean, I think the Panthers got worse, and they're starting a rookie quarterback. Now he might be the guy in the future, but they've got to do a lot of work around him.
I think it's going to be a tough year for Carolina. Real quick, the Tannehill Coach Smith connection in Atlanta. I could see Tannehill ending up as the Falcons quarterback, and he's far from great, but I would probably pick them to win that division with Tannehill.
Ritter falls on his face a mid-year.
Yeah, or even they trade for him next week, or right.
Yeah.
I mean,
or just in the offseason.
Right.
It really sounds like they're behind Ritter. Like, Ritter's our guy. And I want to see. I hope they don't do any moves there, because I want to see. I liked Ritter last year. And so I in the draft. And so I want to see what he looks like there with the Falcons.
I mean, if he is, wow, they're really sitting pretty for this year and the future.
Right. Yeah. Oh, no doubt. Because the Panthers, the Panthers found their quarterback of the future. They hope. The Saints, Carr is a short term. I mean, he's young enough that he could be it's sort of a medium term move, I guess, if Carr is a guy there, and they still have some talent on that roster. And for the Bucks, I don't know what the Bucks are doing right now. I think they're just going to take their medicine this year.
That's as bad a quarterback situation as there is in the league. Big picture.
NFC West, the Arizona Cardinals were 4-13 last year, Matt. The Rams were only 1 game better with 5 wins. The Seahawks were a 9-8 playoff team, and the 49ers won the division at 13-4, losing in the NFC Championship game. And the San Francisco 49ers had the best point differential in the NFL at plus 173 last year, Matt. Arizona Cardinals, I believe, were fourth worst. Point differential behind the Bears, behind the Colts and the Texans with minus 109. And now they don't have Kyler Murray for, half the year.
Yeah, I'm assuming he won't be there at least the first month. They lost 7 in a row. They only won 1 game in the division. I think the defense looks terrible. Rookie head coaches struggle. There's 2 really good teams in the division. And as much as we make fun of the Rams defense, I still think the Rams are better than Arizona. So this is probably my easiest one. No.
Would you take Aaron Donald or the entire Cardinals defense?
Donald.
I do like Buda Baker, and that's just some
Maybe
of
he gets traded.
Just this week, with releasing someone like DeAndre Hopkins too, so they get even worse there. The Cardinals do, and Buda Baker is a guy that needs a new contract. If I'm Michael Bidwell and I'm the Cardinals, I'm giving him everything he wants. He's saying all the right things, sounding like a leader for a team that it's really easy to jump ship on. So I hope Buda Baker gets paid, because he's really the most important player for that franchise right now to just have a face of the franchise and build going forward.
Like, I'm not intentionally picking on Kyler Murray, but if he isn't a great leader, they need the J.J. Watt, the Larry Fitzgerald, the Buda Baker. You know what I mean? Like, someone else has to be the face of the team.
Absolutely. So probably a big no on the Cardinals, right?
No.
And look, this division, even though there's a couple of playoff teams here, you could see how things could get a little weird with the 49ers, because they don't really have their quarterback thing figured out right now, but they have some options at least there that could all turn out okay for them. And they've got a really good defense and a lot of talent on that football team. So it's hard to picture the 49ers falling too far. The Seahawks are a team that added a whole bunch of young talent there. So even if the Cardinals were better than what we expect, which I think they're going to be worse than a 4-win team they were last year, it's still hard to see them leapfrogging more than one team, and that's if the Rams fall in their face, basically.
I can see Seattle people getting too excited about them right now, and they're very average. I'm not predicting that, but I could write that story.
Geno Smith is like, oh yeah, it's still Geno Smith, and he's
still Geno Smith,
not
and he's
good, right?
Yeah, 25th best quarterback in the league or whatever. And the Niners quarterback situation could be a disaster, but even if it's a disaster, the Niners are better than the Cardinals.
Like their disaster scenario is Sam Darnold with all that talent. They should be an 8-win team at worst.
Right,
you would think.
right.
Yeah. So
I think they have a very high floor, the Niners.
absolutely. I totally agree. So with that said, I think the Cardinals rank last as far as teams going worst to first for me.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe then Washington. But which ones are the most likely? I'm going to say Chicago Bears, Matt. Maybe I'm too excited for Justin Fields year 3 and what that team could do. Give me the Chicago Bears, Matt. That's going to be my first draft pick for going worst to first. Because I think the Packers are going to have to figure things out. They still have a decent roster. The Lions could be good. The Vikings could be good. But I think the Bears on paper, to me, with what I think Fields could be, I think they should be a similar team to what we saw from the Lions last year.
Okay. I mean, when we talk tomorrow, I don't think the Vikings are anything close to a 13-4 team. So I don't think that there's a, king of the North that's all that hard to knock off. I'm going to avoid the NFC South because it's too easy to say, well, I'll take the Panthers, Saints, and Falcons,
Right.
So
yeah. For this exercise, it's the Falcons. If you pick the South, it's gotta be Falcons.
Okay. Well, in that case, they would be my pick. But of these 8 teams that we profiled, I think the Jets and Browns could win the Super Bowl.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's where you have to go. And
yeah,
I would say the Bills and Dolphins are slow. The Bengals are really good. And man, Baltimore with Lamar back too. And the Steelers are obviously getting better. And they were already a 9-win team last year. Here's the question for you with the Steelers to finish this up. And it'll help me handicap the Browns here. Because it's just so much harder to be better than 3 teams instead of being better than 1 good team, right? So that might make me put the Jets, who, it'd be just a little bit easier to get over the Dolphins and the Patriots than maybe it would be to get over the Steelers and the Ravens. But the key is the Steelers here. Were the Steelers playing a little over their head last year to win 9 games?
A little. Really, it was a tale of two halves. They had a week 9 bye. They were awful in the first 9 against the hardest schedule in the league. And then they were really, really good if you look at it against a weaker schedule. But Pickett found himself. They ran the ball. Watt came back. And I think their offseason was tremendous. So I know I'm a homer. I know that. But the Steelers win totals 8.5. The over is one of my favorite bets in all of football right now because their schedule is unbelievably easy too.
Well, there you go. Well, not as easy as you think because we've got the new, maybe Super Bowl champion Cleveland Browns twice a year in the division. So anyway, yeah. So between the Jets and the Browns, I'll say Jets, then Browns.
Okay. Man, I can see that.
If you're a Jets fan or a Browns fan, I'm not buying Super Bowl tickets yet, but you can get excited, I think.
Oh, yeah. I think they're both going the right direction. I think they're both contenders. They both might miss the playoffs and have great years, though, because of the divisions in AFC. And, what if Tua gets hurt? And I don't want to say Josh Allen gets hurt, but Tua getting hurt seems to happen with some regularity. Or the Bills stumble a little. I mean, I can see. I think I'll take the Jets have a better chance than the Browns to win their division.
Yeah, I'll put the Jets slightly over the Browns. And I still like the Bears. And obviously the Falcons have a pretty good shot there. Yeah. In that NFC South. Okay, those are the worst to first teams in 2023. Let us know what you think on Twitter at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or drop a comment on YouTube. Matt and I back tomorrow. What about teams that could go first to worst right here? Peacock and Williamson.